well, my name is Alexis. What I'm going to be talking about today is plastic pollution, which hopefully most of you are pretty aware of. Just a term that I'm going to mention is BPA, which is bisphenol A. It's the most famous chemical found in pollution. By the end of today, 60 million water bottles will have been thrown away. And that's just by the end of today. 35 billion will be thrown away within the year. And only 12% of that is recycled. This is how many of you guys can say you guys recycle. Okay, but then imagine that for like the rest of the classes. My proposition is that prohibiting bottled water will reduce the amount of plastic pollution that harms the environment. My first claim is that plastic pollution is the main cause for landfill. This reason being is that landfill increases the risk of wildfires. Rachel Zimmett, she's kind of an activist for preventing fires. She says that 5% of the landfill fires are caused from plastic. I don't know if you're familiar with the 2007 California fires, because that was due to the heat. California, with the exception of like the past few weeks, is a very warm place. It's very hot, and all the trash and the pollution, specifically the plastics, heat up and they start to burn, which releases oxygen, which has an effect on the oxygen in the air. Not only just the air, but the industries that are creating the plastic, they have oil spills. According to Planet Aid, 36% of the oil spills from the industries end up in the ocean. And 97% of our water supply is actually from the ocean, meaning 36% of the oil is in our water. This brings me on to my next point, which is about current, I guess you could say, solutions to end plastic bottles. For example, New York City is attempting to go plastic-free throughout their parks. According to Winnie Hu, he is a writer for the New York Times. In just a single cafe alone in New York City, 400 water bottles are being sold. But their goal is to ban the amount of water bottles being sold. However, just because they're attempting to ban it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be banned. It's not necessarily solving the problem because there's still access to it. For example, the law that had recently passed for the straws. Because how many of you go to a restaurant and you still get a straw? Exactly. Why? Because they're still being made accessible to you. It's the same thing with the plastic bags. Plastic bags, I can speak, for example, I work in a store, and the first thing that people tell me is, I need bags. And the amount of people that are coming into a store, and just in one store, imagine in all the billion other stores that are around the whole world. People are still using them for the same reason, because they're made accessible to them, which means that the companies are still going to produce the product, which doesn't solve anything, just that people are now paying for the bags, which is only 10 cents, which you can probably find literally underneath the vending machine. This brings me on to my next point, because the products are still being made, they're still going into the ocean, which then pollutes our food chain, because according to the World Count, hookworm is a disease found inside of sea animals, which comes from them eating the plastic and containing the chemicals that are found in the plastic, which we then later, if you do eat seafood, you then contain into your own body. This brings me to my last claim, that plastic pollution has a negative effect on human health, which I think we could all agree on. PBA, which I had mentioned earlier, the most famous chemical found in pollution, it hasn't interfered with your human hormones, causing you to not develop all of those hormones that humans develop. Not only that, but their toxins are linked to cancer, different birth defects, and also different diseases. Not only is it affecting what we take into our body, eating-wise or like drinking-wise, but also the air that we breathe, because like I said before, industries are still making the product. And like I had mentioned earlier as well, the oil spills. The oil releases carbon dioxide, which causes smog. It causes smoke, which we breathe in and out every day. You need to breathe in order to survive. This causes asthma and also different respiratory problems. And the older you get, the weaker your respiratory system is. Just like when you're first born, the weaker your respiratory is, and the younger you are, it'll stop from developing it. So that's why that prohibiting bottled water will reduce the amount of plastic pollution harming the environment.
Okay, where you identify the proposition, it is kind of a hypothetical situation, suggesting that if we had a prohibition on bottles, that it would reduce ocean pollution. Although you seem to go in a lot of other directions with the supporting material in the speech, talking about a variety of pollutions, not just the ocean pollutions. It all seems like it's vaguely connected to the issue of use of plastics, but the idea that it's quantifiable, I think, is a little bit problematic. The best quantifiable information that you have is the information about the number of plastic bottles that are used on a daily basis, but the connection between those number of bottles and any harm that occurs in landfills or leaching of the chemical into the ocean is a little bit thin and speculative. I think you need to have something more substantial. You just kind of take it as a given that it somehow gets from point A to point B and therefore causes a problem. I don't think anybody disputes that there is pollution that results from the use of plastic bottles. The landfill fires thing, it was not clear to me at all what you were suggesting. That, and you mentioned California fires, for instance, and I'm wondering, do we have more plastic bottles in landfills that are causing this problem in California than we do other places? That's a little bit confusing. I'm not sure if you're suggesting that the light from the sun goes through the plastic bottles and creates a fire, or that it just burns longer when it's in a landfill and the landfill catches fire. And I don't really have much information about landfill fires here, so I just don't understand how that argument really develops in the long run. The notion that there is leaching of plastics and the chemicals in plastics into the ocean makes a little bit more sense. You have some data that talks about how the spills end up in the ocean. There is a little bit of confusion, though, because at one point you said 96% of our water comes from the ocean. I'm going, well, I don't think anybody's drinking water from the ocean, so I know that's the main amount of water on the planet, but the notion that we're going to get contaminated from consuming that water, I think that's a little bit problematic. I assume that you're trying to suggest that there's contamination of the fish in the ocean that then somehow contaminates us, but like I said, I don't really see much evidence that has happened. You mentioned hookworms being related to the chemicals there. That sounds like a little bit of a stretch. The evidence that you had was very generic on this, and I think it needs to be much more specific. The sources are not necessarily scientific. There are a couple of them that you're presenting that sound like they're advocacy groups, and they may be citing some scientific evidence, but the way they're drawing their inferences, I think, is a little bit problematic. It just feels like you're kind of all over the place on this speech, and the data that you're providing is kind of generic, and it needs to be a little bit stronger. I think the topic, like I said, the proposition's clearly stated at the beginning. I think you do a nice job speaking to the audience for the most part, but the argument needs a lot more focus and organization, and some of the information needs to be more specific to the claim that you're presenting. All right, thank you.